Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm watching the number tick up as we go here. But we wanted to say hello and get things started relatively on time. So I'm Carla Bruni. I'm the Resiliency and Preservation Specialist with the Chicago Bungalow Association. And very excited tonight. We have Bridget Walsh, who's the landscape designer with City Grange. We've done all kinds of projects with City Grange in recent years. They're an incredible partner to us. And Bridget's going to talk about how grand gestures in small urban gardens can make a more ecologically diverse city. We're going to discuss what you need to know to assess your site, design pleasing and functional solutions for your space, and select the perfect plants. We're gonna let Bridget talk until until around 7 o'clock-ish probably, and then we're gonna have about 15 minutes for questions after that. Just want everybody to know that we've disabled the chat function, so please put any questions you have in the Q&A section. I'm going to be going through those questions and pulling them out for the Q&A at the end. So they're not going to get answered as we go. It's just really distracting to try and do this on video and handle them all that way. So we're going to wait till the end. A lot of things are probably going to be answered also as time goes on. So, don't worry about, you might want to just hold off. And if you have some questions, and they're probably going to be answered, a lot of them anyway. So, but yeah, I guess without further ado, then I can turn this over to Bridget if you're good to go.
Thanks, Carla. Yeah, this is great. I'm so happy to see everyone kind of rolling in here. It looks like we've got a pretty nice crowd. So I know my email inbox has been flooded with people kind of feeling this spring, this awesome, wonderful, mild spring weather, but it's definitely, yeah, people are thinking about gardening and early this year. So we've been having a lot of fun talking with people about kind of, what to do now, what to hold off on, and all that good stuff. So I'm pretty excited to be meeting with everyone here tonight, quote unquote, to talk about some really kind of quick and dirty ways to think about our small city spaces and kind of be creative in the way that you kind of address your sites. And then of course, think about the plant material and kind of creating a splash of color in your backyard. So give me 1 second and I am going to get my screens all set up. I always think that I'm good at this and then it comes around and let's see, here we are. Okay. So we are, here we go, sorry. There we go. Okay. So we are City Grange. City Grange is a garden center, 2 garden centers and growing. Our first location is located at 5500 Northwestern in Lincoln Square. And our second location is down in the Beverly neighborhood at 1818 West 99th Street. Our mantra, we believe the world would be a better place with more gardeners in it. Our mission, to remove every barrier to our customers' growing success. And our motto is United We Blossom. Everyone that works with us truly believes this. Working with plants is something that is like, it's a really satisfying. And if you're working with plants and you're not happy to be doing it, then yeah, no one like that works with us. So we really love kind of working with people who really care about their spaces and want to make the world a better place. So let's just jump into it. So the Chicago Bungalow Association, out in the bungalow belt and, in the inner city and kind of just our standard Chicago city lot. Generally speaking, most of us have our 25 by 125 lots, just about. I go on many, consultations weekly, and almost every time I hear the same thing. I have my postage stamp yard. What that means is very different for everyone. Some people think they have a postage stamp yard and it's 3 times the size of mine, or 2 times the size of their neighbors. Other people have really kind of embraced their small spaces. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here today. Is a small space is certainly not a hindrance to what you can do in your backyard. I thought this was really interesting. Let's see if this works. So this is from Home Advisor, and I thought this was just really neat. So, and this is from 2011. So who knows how accurate this is now? But in the United States, average lots rank, quite differently. Illinois is down here. We're looking at it's such a wide range here, but we're looking at basically average house size to average yard space in square footage. So in square footage, West Virginia 38. I mean, that's wild compared to our Illinois 12,000 square foot, and in Chicago, that's you know that's amazing. That's not what we're talking about here. In Chicago, we're more on average 150 square foot to 150 square foot in the front yard to 400 square foot in the backyard. Of course, that can range quite a bit if you have a single car garage, a double car garage, no front yard at all. But generally speaking, that's about what we're talking about. So one of my first kind of big tricks is to pull out your plat of survey. Almost everyone has a plat of survey, and it always surprises me when people don't know right away like where they can find their plat of survey. Because for me, and maybe this is because I'm just looking at these constantly, a plat of survey is one of the most helpful tools you can have as you're starting to think about your outdoor space. It really helps put things into perspective, and it helps you kind of color block the way you're using your space, the amount of space you have, and the way you kind of move through the space and use it. So I'm kind of using this case study backyard because I'm very familiar with it. It's my own backyard. So this is one that I've, all winter long, I sit and pick this apart when I'm slow at work. So this is something that I figured is an easy one, and it doesn't, I'm not having to use one of my clients as an example. Anyway, this is my backyard. I started looking at my plat of survey really critically and thinking about the spaces that I had. I have this really big deck that kind of floats out in the middle of my yard, and it almost acts as like a peninsula, and it really cuts off the space. When I first moved in, I had this massive vegetable garden, 160 square feet, which was far too large for me. And it also really, it really didn't allow for us to have any kind of entertainment or lounge space. We also have this long kind of, I'll call it a bowling alley kind of style, 250 square foot. So none of these things are very large, but together, the vegetable garden was too large, the deck felt too large, and the lawn just really wasn't providing us much opportunity for play or anything otherwise. So this is kind of where we start. So here we are. This is my giant, I mean, it felt like a farm in my backyard, and it was, I'm sure some of you are thinking like, what a sin to take this out. I kept the soil, but I really thought about this space as a huge potential for some entertainment, and for us, this just really wasn't working. So as we kind of move through the space or through this slide, I want you to really kind of think about what works for you in your space. And if your space isn't working the way it is now, either in the way you get to the garbage can or the way you entertain or the way you grill or the way you garden, then it's you can really think critically about this. You don't really have to work with what you got. Sometimes you can adjust things and it's for the better. So I love this last picture, obviously. It's my dog. I opened up the back door and neither I or she could see into the backyard because we had this kind of wobbly trellis that was falling over. And the only way she could really see beyond was to poke through the trellis. And although it was beautiful, it made our yard feel so small because we opened the back door and we saw the big grape leaves. So once again, plat of survey, find your plat of survey and use that as kind of your base to scribble, to draw. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it really helps you start to understand the allowance of space you have. And it helps you start to kind of block out, how you want to use those spaces better. Maybe you're using, a highlighter and you're kind of using trace paper and scribbling all over it. But I think everyone that's thinking about gardening should do this at a larger scale before you dig anything and plant anything. So thinking about small spaces, I want people to also kind of forget what they think they know about gardens. We get tricked a lot of times, going into, or I guess looking on Pinterest and seeing these like magnificent gardens that are huge and they have all these big drifts of grasses and these big trees. And in the city, we do not have that sort of space ability. So these are a few pictures that I've kind of collected along the way. This picture here is actually in a sewer well in South Carolina. And it was amazing. It was almost like a terrarium. Lots of ferns. It was unbelievable. And the second picture here, I mean, this to me is a garden. This is grasses, volunteer grasses growing up through the cracks of an old abandoned parking lot. The third image here is a parkway. This to me is also a garden. This is a rock garden, and someone took a lot of time and put a lot of love and effort into this parkway, and it's beautiful. And you can see the car kind of whizzing past behind it, and it's just a really lovely way to make a space. Some people call it a hell strip, and that is certainly a valid name for a parkway. They tend to be kind of a pain in the butt. So taking your parkway or your health strip or whatever it is you call it, depending on regionally where you're from, think about that space as a really great opportunity to do something different other than, a patch of sad dying grass. This bottom image here, oh, and there goes my dog. Sorry. So this bottom image here is the crack garden. I love this image. One of my professors in college showed me this project, and I just thought it was one of the most amazing kind of precedent projects you could think of. I believe this was in San Francisco. This was a couple who had a parking lot pad in their backyard. It was the only thing that they had. It was just cement slab, no opportunity for green space. And what this couple did with CGM, landscape architecture, was they basically, rented a jackhammer and came through and carved these crevices into the cement pad, packed it with soil, and then packed it with plants. And eventually what happened is those roots became established and they kind of pushed away at the surrounding cement, and they actually kind of forced some of the cement to disperse, and eventually they were left with this really kind of wonderful, lush, really interesting use of space. It's a great project. It's a really nice way to do something creative. This is another one that I just love. So I just took this video a couple months ago, actually in the dead of winter. Talk with a lot of people who want fountains. Who want fountains in their backyard, who want water features. And to me, this is 2 magnolia leaves. Obviously, this is coming out of a little burbling, brook. But this is something where, this totally caught my eye and is jaw-dropping. 2 little magnolia leaves creating this beautiful sound. Kind of want to play it again. Let's see if I can. Oh, it's awesome. I love it. I love it. The mosses. But you can do a lot with not a little, or with a little, I should say. So generally speaking, the way we're kind of going to go through this is I'm going to give you my 5 tips and tricks as you're thinking about your small space. And then we'll kind of get into the details, the plant material. I know a big thing is kind of thinking about lawn alternatives. So we'll talk about all of that. But in the beginning, I want to start off with kind of these big picture ideas of tips and tricks. So first and foremost, look for inspiration, work in your backdrop, find your focal point, embrace vertical opportunities, and incorporate containers. These are 5 things that you can do no matter the scale of your project and no matter what phase you are in your project. So I mentioned this before. I think Pinterest is a great place to look for inspiration. And I think going to botanic gardens is a wonderful way to get inspiration. But I think, especially like right now we're super lucky because we're having a really mild spring. But when you really should be when you should be planning for your, your big project is over winter. And sometimes you don't have the ability to kind of go outside your own four walls. I mean, think about this past year, we haven't had much opportunity to explore. And I think you can find a lot of inspiration within your own four walls. So walk around your house, think about the things that like make you really happy, a piece of stained glass, a piece of artwork. This is kind of a shameless plug, but this is one of my sister's paintings, and I totally love it. Of course, it's kind of, if you think and look closely at this is very much like an abstract aerial view, kind of with these hedgerows and these kind of tree symbols back here. But this to me, I mean, I can really break this apart. And this is a piece of art that I have that there are so many reasons why I love it. I love the layers that colors kind of poke out through kind of these washes of white and light purple, and that there's these very strong reeds of green, but then they're kind of neutralized by these big kind of cloudy kind of drifts of white. So if you find something in your house that you totally love and maybe you've carried it with you forever, like really study that thing and think about why you love it. And those are things you can so easily incorporate into your garden space. Second tip, work on your backdrop. Okay, so obviously this first one is not in Chicago, and actually neither is the second one. That one's in Denver. But I love this first image because this first image doesn't even, I mean, it has some geraniums in it. I mean, that's this kind of red flower here, but this, I mean, and this is asphalt leading right up to the front door. But because of the materials they've chosen, and they've really highlighted this front door with this red, and then they've kind of married the front door with the geranium, it's a really simple, clean way to make a bold statement. Same goes for the second image. I mean, this is something I totally love, this bright neon green. I'm sure that drove some of the neighbors crazy, but like that to me is amazing. Without even having a ton of landscape plants, they've created something really jaw dropping, when you're going 20 miles an hour past the house. So these are really great kind of ways to start at the structure and let those become a part of the environment that surrounds your house. So back to the case study, backyard. So we ended up taking out all of the vegetable beds. We had a good couple weekends where we were just sweating out in the backyard. We did this at the end of the summer, so we yielded a lot of tomatoes, basically all of the year's produce, and most of those things came from seed because we didn't plant anything. But we came through, we removed everything. And then that night, the second we got space and we kind of readopted that space, we grabbed all of our random assortment of chairs and we sat out in the backyard. And it made kind of a weird decision that I didn't feel like 100% good about, removing a totally wonderful vegetable garden. The second we were able to sit out there and actually like experience our backyard, it all felt totally right. And I knew we made the right decision. So then all of a sudden we're left with kind of this garage, and we're able to kind of stylize it, and now we're using it. But now all of a sudden this backdrop becomes something that when I open the door, all of a sudden I have this long view of the garage, and long view meaning like, 25 feet or something. But now all of a sudden we have this long view of the garage, and our garage is a single car. It's got this like awkwardly small window, but it's something that now we look at. It's in need of a paint job, and now I've been obsessing over the paint color. But before I even got there, as kind of my campaign to paint the garage, my convincing, I started to kind of mock up just like colors, and these are totally not the colors I'm going to go with, but it felt really fun to kind of just color block and see what I liked, even just generally what color family I liked as this backdrop. And as you know, this has nothing to do with plants, but when this kind of garage is painted, all of a sudden this sad little peach tree that doesn't seem to want to do anything will actually kind of maybe glow in front of kind of this gray blue color that I think I'm going to go with. But it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. And as we kind of move through, we'll see that we could even push this even further. There is and I recommend doing this for couch cushions, for front doors, back doors. Start on the backdrop. If you're having kind of trouble thinking about paint colors, or even how to do kind of this kind of demo, Sherwin-Williams has a really nice paint tool where you can kind of drag and drop different paint colors, and that's really great. So I mentioned before focal points. So we're standing here at the back door here at the Star. And that focal point, before I had a big grapevine right at the front or at the back door. Now all of a sudden I've elongated this view looking at the garage. When we kind of round the corner, I'm lucky enough to have a really happy lilac that's in the back alley or near the back alley. So my longest view is actually already established. I'm also lucky enough to have a single car garage. I don't feel that way when I'm like wiggling out to try to get in and out, but I feel really lucky that I have a bigger yard. So I'm all for it. Now, what we ended up doing was relocating the veggie beds and doing them raised. So I still have vegetable beds. We took that really amazing soil and we backfilled it into these vegetable beds. But now all of a sudden we really created opportunity for multiple focal points. And that's something that's huge. In a small space, you have to kind of create these moments where you can stop and kind of gaze. So if you have a bench that you really love, like how can you put that bench in a space that you can see it, and that maybe it's kind of back planted by things that kind of create a beautiful vignette. So once again, this is where if you have your plat of survey, like that hard work is done and you can just get scribbling. And these are really quick gestures where this is so clear that this is the longest view. So if at your longest view, you don't have a focal point, create one. That's a really great way, get a big tree in there, think about scale and get something that anchors your corners. This is just a fun exercise and one that will make all the difference when you're actually in the space. Other focal points. So here are those raised beds that we talked about. We built these last year, right before wood prices skyrocketed. This year, I've already told most of my clients, we're not going to be building beds unless you want to be paying a lot more extra money that you don't need to. But these were the beds we decided to build. My husband and I built them over a weekend. It was an easy project, actually, and one that if you're interested in doing, you most definitely should. It felt pretty awesome to be able to put these in the ground and to be able to use that wonderful soil. So now all of a sudden what we have here, this used to be basically lawn that went right to the back. You can see this kind of tree here. The lawn went right up to the back of that. And for us, I don't need a lawn. So this made a ton of sense to me. In doing this, now all of a sudden we've kind of created a new focal point. So when we're sitting at the fire pit, all of a sudden now we have this kind of diversion, and now we can look kind of towards the other property line to the south of us. So we went through here, we removed the lawn, we did this really nice bluestone chip. In the dark, we did these, we put these bricks out. We did a compacted base and we did this kind of starburst shape that really kind of anchored these beds. These are big beds. One of my coworkers called them my coffins, but I love them. Now that they're kind of in the space, they feel totally to scale. But what we did here was, put some big bean poles in just to kind of give it some height. And once those things fill in, it's going to be really beautiful. Initially, when I was thinking about this space, I was thinking about doing an arbor, but I kind of got over that. I already had these, so I just dropped these in and called it a day. Embrace vertical opportunities. So once again, small spaces, and we're in the city, we've got a ton of vertical opportunities. We've got fences, we've got garages, we've got our houses, and then we've also got kind of like, views of alleys and things like that. So we have to embrace all of the vertical opportunities we have. And we can do this in a lot of different ways. One of the ways I'm going to do it here is I'm going to get some lattice work and hang it off the eaves of the garage and mount some planters to this. And then I'll have kind of this floating green wall. This does a lot of different things. It totally hides this dorky small window. It creates a focal point, and it will kind of just help anchor this plum tree and this couch. So it won't, that wall at the back won't feel so large, even though it's small, but everything will feel really nice and proportionate. Other ways to embrace vertical opportunities, you see this center image a lot with these columnar trees. Columnar trees are an amazing city thing. These plant scientists, they know what they're doing, because this is something where every project I go onto, every backyard could use a columnar tree like this. Columnar trees typically, there are many different varieties of trees that are grown to be this narrow and this tall. Some of my favorites are slender silhouette sweet gum, which gets like only 2.5, 3 foot wide, but can get 25 feet tall. It's a really cool tree for narrow spaces, and you could do a whole hedge of them. You could also do hornbeams, which get a little bit beefier, but this is a really great way to kind of create this floating hedge. I love this fence here. First of all, because the little dog that lived in here would come out and kind of greet us through this little peephole. But once these plants filled in, the plants kind of poked through the fence, and it really kind of softened the boundary line between the front yard and the front door. This is a really great, nice way to make a huge impact on your landscape beyond plants. And also just kind of change things up a little bit. We see a lot of the same stuff. So sometimes it's nice to see people kind of thinking about a property line with a creative and kind of soft approach. This picture is down in Pilsen at the community garden. And I love this because the mural that they've done along the big industrial building kind of becomes a part of the garden. A lot of bright yellows and oranges. And as you kind of walk through the space, that mural really does feel like a part of the garden, even though it's, 25 foot tall and goes 200 foot. So it's a really nice way to embrace every space. And then of course incorporate containers. Incorporating containers can come in many different forms, but I think a container garden is equally as important as a vegetable garden or as a traditional kind of planted in-ground garden. Containers are a really great way to show your personality. They're a great way to, in this center top image here, that space doesn't have any plantable space. That's a patio. And yet they've created two kind of rooms here by separating the space with this cluster of containers. So that's actually 5 different containers, and each container has one variety of plant material in it. So as a whole, it reads like this beautiful kind of mass planting. But if you were to kind of pick that space apart, you would find 5 different containers with 5 different species of plants in each. So it's a really great way to do that. Other ways to do it here, I mean, this is something that isn't necessarily specific to bungalows, but something we're all very familiar with, this kind of feeling of sharing a property line. It's not necessarily that you want to like block off your neighbors by any means, but creating a nice soft barrier of plants it just really creates kind of this warm embrace. So what we did here, 3 containers mounted on the rails. This is great for raised decks, which I know in the city we have a ton of raised decks, which kind of create this feeling of a stage. And when you're up on your stage, sometimes it feels like your neighbors are just looking right up at you, or you're looking right down at your neighbors. So think about rail planters in kind of locations like that. And then on the end here on the right hand side, these are 2 kind of interesting approaches to containers. These are chimney flutes, which I just love that look. It's very popular right now, but it's really great, and you can get them for cheap. They don't have bottoms, so it's something that you definitely need to think about. The soil basically just goes right down and hits the ground. So I wouldn't put those on a deck, but you could certainly kind of group those along impervious surface or in a hard to grow area. Maybe nothing is growing in the soil. Maybe you can just rise them up and do this nice kind of mass planting. This is my cowboy boot planter. I love her. She's great. She's about 100 pounds. But I love this. I mean, this is the planter that I have in the backyard. I'm gonna fill it with a bunch of sedum and it's gonna look awesome. But for me, without having the opportunity to do like a big block of containers, I'm gonna go with the statement planter instead. So to kind of wrap that up, 5 tips and tricks. And you know what? I'm going to throw in the sixth. I'm going to say let's say like tip 0 is getting your plat of survey out, digging it out of the drawers. That's your tip 0. But look for your inspiration in whatever kind of things you have around the house that you love before you even open up a plant book. Work on your backdrop. Right now is a great time to get out there and start doing those projects, like painting, like kind of creating those focal points. Find your focal point, embrace vertical opportunities. I just go back, right now is a perfect time to be doing all of these kind of hardscapey things that are really going to help tie the garden together. Incorporate containers. That's a lifelong thing. Containers should be a collection. Something you really, well, first of all, they're a big investment, but something that you kind of collect over the years will make a really interesting, wonderful container collection. Okay, so now let's get into plant material. With bungalows, that was the big idea with bungalows, is that, the inside could kind of bleed into the outside and that you could have this beautiful view out of the bay windows to see, your garden space, your cut garden and all that good stuff. But one thing that's very important is really understanding what you can grow. So a gardening book or a website from another state, sometimes the internet is wonderful and sometimes it's horrible. I work with a lot of people who show me pictures of plants and they really want it and it's just not possible. So know where you are. Basically, when you hear that Chicago is zone 6, what that means is that perennials and shrubs, the lowest temperature they can withstand, and it's basically the way the USDA groups kind of the country. So the lowest temperatures they can withstand and continue to grow year after year. So Chicago is zone 6A. Some of those collar counties fall into zone 5B. For me, and I think I say this in every presentation, talk with your block zone, talk with your neighbors. If you have a gardening group or a community garden down the street, like really make note of the things that you love in those spaces and ask the people there. Plant people want to talk about plants a lot. So if one of your neighbors has something that you love, ask them about that plant and ask them, how long did it take to establish? Did you have to water it a ton to get it established? Don't just assume because it's there and it's blooming that it was easy. Some people work really hard on getting those things and other things come super easy. So ask the gardener who's tending the space, how that plant worked. And they'll be more than willing to share their knowledge with you. This is another one. A lot of people kind of don't really know what they have when it comes to exposure. Generally speaking, people in the city have microclimates depending on where they are in the yard. So full shade is less than 4 hours of sun. We have a lot of spaces like that between property lines, right underneath a fence. If you've got a big city tree, you might be more just in like the unfiltered, like dappled sun range. But there's many different ranges for this. So this is one that I would also say, like, study over the course of your garden. And if you've just moved into your space, don't assume that you have a full sun garden or a full shade garden. You might want to wait an entire season before deciding what your exposure is in your space. You can even get into something called sun mapping, which is basically if you take a plat of survey kind of base and you make note of where it's shady and say the date and the time. Look up shade or sun mapping. It's kind of a rabbit hole, but that's a really, really great way to start exploring your space and understanding your space better. And certainly do this before you buy any plant material. Every plant has a different growth rate. Research before you buy. I say this all the time. Research your space, research the plant before you buy a plant. A lot of people like to blame the plants. The plant didn't do well, or that the plant didn't do this. But usually, what the case is that like we didn't do good enough understanding the space, understanding the light conditions, understanding the soil conditions. Beware of zone envy, cultivate patience, anticipate change. So this is one of those things, when you plant something in the ground, like that's a baby. You need to water it. You need to kind of learn to grow with the plant rather than just expecting like this final outcome of the plant. You may have heard this quote before, or this saying, but the first year it sleeps, the second year it creeps, and the third year it leaps. And that's so true. In the first year, a garden is really just kind of getting established. And by year 3, you can really start to see the shape and the color of the garden and the rhythm of the garden. So it's really fun to see those changes over the years. And if you kind of go into it expecting by year 1 you're going to have this magnificent space, then you're kind of, not to say setting yourself up for disappointment, but in some ways you kind of are. Your garden is going to change. A big street tree is going to come down, and your full shade space might become a full sun space, and that's all good. You can share your plants with your neighbors. You can move them to a backyard, shift stuff around. Don't be nervous to move things, so long as you kind of, get enough of the root zone and you really do well by the plant. Okay, so kind of this case study site, Reimagine, just to kind of tie this all back together, and also get on to the next topic, which I love to talk about, reducing the lawn. So basically, removing I think it was about 150 square foot vegetable garden. I've now reduced my vegetable garden to 50 square feet. That's two 2x6 beds and one 2.5 by 9 foot bed. That's a ton of space. It's honestly feels like a little bit too much for me even. But I know once I get my tomatoes and peppers and all my herbs in there, it'll feel good. But what that basically left us with was 200 square foot of dining, lounge area, usable space. Now kind of unit 1 has that deck that floats over this, and unit 2 has the space to really kind of hang out in the backyard. In reducing our lawn, I'm down to 100 square foot. This to me is the absolute bare minimum. If you are trying to maintain a space of lawn that is less than 100 square foot, you're fighting a losing battle. I think it's a waste of time, a waste of energy, and what a pain in the butt to grab the lawnmower out of the garage and wiggle it around all your corners to cut the grass for like 5 minutes. I am working on my current campaign to get rid of the lawn. So this is a quote, Doug Tallamy, Bringing Nature Home. He's an amazing person. We did an event a few weeks ago called the Great Grow Along, and Doug Tallamy was one of our speakers. We were really, really lucky to have him. He says, if half of American lawns were replaced with native plants, we would create the equivalent of a 20 million acre national park, 9 times bigger than Yellowstone or 100 times bigger than the Shenandoah National Park. This is huge. If more Americans, it's funny, I go on these consultations, and I feel like sometimes I'm in like marriage counseling, like battling between the partner who wants to keep the lawn and the partner who doesn't care at all about the lawn. But there are really great alternatives. I have this link here. Let's see if this works. Homegrown National Park. This is Doug Tallamy's. So this is his big push right now, restoring biodiversity 1 person at a time. I definitely recommend you take a look at this website. It's growing. It's just getting started. This is something that's really great. He's basically really educating people on how to get to that point where more of our land is helping pollinators and sequestering carbon and allowing water to kind of go deep into our soils. This is a great project and one that I definitely recommend looking into when we're done here. I mentioned before that I have to do kind of some soft moderation between family residents. One of the things I like to point out is that we live in Chicago, and if you have a backyard that you want to kick a ball around in, likely your yard isn't big enough to do that, and your little patch of grass isn't really that good for kicking around a ball anyway. 98% of Chicago residents live within a 10-minute walk to a park. That's amazing. That is such a great resource. And if we treat like our parks as those open kind of playing fields, that would get more people into the parks, and it would allow for more opportunity within our own yards to really create a wonderful biodiverse space. So I'm gonna do another link jump here. Let's see, where's my mouse at? No, sorry, my mouse is hiding. Come on. Okay, it's not letting me open. Oh, there we go. So the Trust for Public Land, there's my source on this. This is another really cool thing. So we are number 10 in the country, the Trust for Public Land. This is really cool. And obviously, you know, every neighborhood in the city is pretty different as far as walkability and transportation. Sometimes getting to a park isn't as easy. But this is pretty damn impressive. 98% of residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park. If you really want lawn and you need that lawn and that open space, I go to the park. Go to the park. We have a much bigger goal at hand, and that's to get some natives into our space and really start helping these pollinators. So this slide that I'm going to focus on here is replacing the lawn in shade and part sun shade areas. I find a lot of people are really holding on to their lawn in areas where our kind of standard Kentucky bluegrass or, you know, your standard roll of sod just doesn't want to live. There are so many great alternatives other than you know, sod or seed, and I think that they should be really seriously considered. Carex is a great one. Carex is a sedge, and sedge is great. It spreads pretty slowly, but really naturally. It's a great place for pollinators to kind of hibernate in over winter. It's got great texture. And if you plant 5 of them in year 5, you'll have 10, 15. They kind of spread really naturally, and it's really great. They have great texture and they're really nice and low. So I use this image a lot because it's really nice and soft, and it kind of hugs the curves of the pathway. And it also kind of looks like grass from afar because it just has that really nice reed. Wild geranium is a great lawn alternative. In general, I would say ground covers, that's the term you're looking for if you want to replace your lawn, is ground cover. Geranium is a ground cover in my eye because it's under a foot. And in ground covers, there aren't a lot of native ground covers. So what I've covered here are the native kind of low growing things. If you get into the non-natives, you could do ajuga, mazus, thyme even. Those are great options for replacing your lawn. My go-to is always Carex. Wild ginger is one that I recommend for people with shade and very kind of well-established trees. This can grow great around the base of a well-established tree. Like I said, all of these are natives. Now, Carex does have 1,800 or more varieties readily available. Carex pennsylvanica, Carex blonda, those are 2 that are you can find pretty much at any trusted garden center. So how do we go about replacing our lawn? After you win your war to get rid of the lawn, what you're going to want to do, and this is something that it's so DIY friendly, it's crazy. Remove the lawn. Get a nice sharp spade, a wheelbarrow, Once you get the rhythm down, going in at that angle, you can remove quite a bit of lawn pretty quickly. If you have a larger amount of space, I would say, go to a big box store or an equipment rental place and get a sod cutter. What a sod cutter does is it basically removes 2 to 3 inches of of sod and a slight amount of soil. But after you get through that 2, 3 inches, come through and remove any large clumps or rocks or gravel or construction debris. At that point, you would want to rake in some really nice nutrient-rich compost, whether you've made it or you purchase it elsewhere. Definitely look for local compost with local food waste and leaf mulch and all that good stuff. That is really going to help enrich your soils. I don't recommend tilling. Tilling kind of undoes all of the things that the existing soil has already worked really hard to do. So I don't recommend tilling. Generally speaking, in most of our gardens, we don't have to till. Just to add new compost in and kind of rake it in, let it settle for a week so that the soil kind of, maybe sits through a couple of rain events, but it'll kind of start to compact on its own. You will see weeds germinate, but before you do any planting, just remove those little weeds. And then, of course, why natives? Natives are they're definitely a popular buzzword right now, and that's for a really good reason. We really need more gardeners planting native plants. There are many different kind of schools of thoughts on natives, but generally speaking, the best reasons to plant natives, there are a great host for pollinators. Each plant has kind of evolved over the years to work in tandem with our pollinators. And certain plants are great pollinators for one thing and not so great for other things, and that really helps the whole ecosystem. So natives are great for pollinators. They're also great for promoting healthy soil. They prevent erosion and create really nice topsoil. The great thing about natives is that they set really deep roots, so they're able to take in a lot more water because they don't just have those surface roots. They really set deep roots. Which is one thing that some people tend to find confusing about natives, is that they don't see the native action right away. And a lot of time that's because the plants are focusing instead on setting really deep root systems. So they're not really focusing their energy. I guess I shouldn't say this as a blanket statement. Some focus more energy in the beginning years on their root systems, more so than flower and foliage. So sometimes natives can be slow to establish. Other times they can be really fast to establish, and that throws people off too. So once again, you have to research your plants before you plant them. They help sequester pollutants, so they help clean the air. And the best part about growing natives, well, maybe not the best part, the most beneficial part at like a human level, which is of course like so egocentric, but they're easy. They are meant to be in this region. We're not forcing tropicals to live outside. We're not bringing plants in from Asia that might be competing with our natives. We brought so much stuff here from all over the place that we started to kind of lose sight of what was meant to be here, and we have so many beautiful things that a lot of them, we work with a woman called Flora Caputo, and she's kind of our native guru, but she made a really good point, is that a lot of our natives are called weeds. So like we call goldenrod sneezeweed. Oh gosh, no, I can't think of any other weeds, but whatever. A lot of them end in weeds, and that's such a bad naming convention on our end. But natives are beautiful, and they're worth incorporating into your space. Maybe start small and kind of grow to a space that you're comfortable. Milkweed, there we go. That's a perfect example. Milkweed. Milkweed is another great thing that everyone is really focused on right now for a good reason. Milkweed is great because milkweed is, and milkweed is not on the slide. Milkweed is the only plant that a monarch caterpillar can feed on. But once that monarch kind of, spreads its wings, it needs to start having nectar to feed on. So these are three great plants beyond the stage of the caterpillar that are needed to help the monarch butterfly. So buy your milkweed for the beginning stages, but then if you have milkweed in your space, think about those late summer, early autumn things, plants that the monarchs need. So liatris, goldenrod, aster, those all tend to bloom like August to November. Some of them really do persist until like frost. But I mean, having those things in your garden really keeps the garden vibrant and verdant and healthy. It's my last slide. So on this note, I really want to challenge you to kind of take a space that isn't working now, enrich the soils and start planting. Don't be nervous to plant things. Don't think because you don't have like, a planting designer background or whatever that you can't do it. My biggest suggestion is just kind of, use repetition. If you, instead of buying one plant, buy 3, buy 5, that will really help create a nice kind of vignette, and also help, think about those plants. Those plants want to be in a community. So instead of planting things, far apart from each other, do them in nice little clusters, because then those plants are able to kind of keep each other going. They keep the humidity about constant, they really enrich the soils. And when you plant things kind of in communities like this, you'll be much happier as a gardener as well, and as a caretaker or caregiver to these plants, because they will do work for you. They will keep weeds out, they will take in that water, and they're going to provide a ton of beauty. So instead of thinking about our little small lots as kind of these 25 by 125 rectangles, like start to think of this as like a patchwork where we can really all work together to create a really beautiful mosaic of plant material in our cities. This is fun. You guys got this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bridget. That was so great. And you hit so many great topics. And that always bothers me so much about the weed terminology. It's like they're weeds because they're supposed to be here. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy. Why they're here, they belong here. And all these herbicide commercials where it's like, oh, must kill the weed, anyway. Yeah. But that was great. We've got some questions in here. Just gonna get through. I think we might be able to get through most of these. Okay, so Marianne has those horrid old evergreens in front of her bungalow, and they're ripping them out this year, but need to have someone grind the stump down. Mm-hmm. Do you know, is this a service that City Grange offers, or can you guys recommend anybody?
Actually, well, we don't offer that service. But what I found this year to be a really great service is TaskRabbit.
Really, for that?
Yes, there are landscapers on TaskRabbit. And, right now we have a lot of landscaping companies in the city, but there are also a lot of people who are unemployed and doing these odd jobs. And on TaskRabbit, there are a ton of people who are offering landscape services. So that's a really great way to start. I will say, like, April 8th, most landscaping companies are pretty, not to say booked, but pretty busy, and it's hard to get people. So that's a really good way to kind of get around that.
Cool. Great. Okay. Oh, and I also just wanted to jump in and remind everybody, this is being recorded. So don't freak out if you miss the beginning, or if you can't remember something and we don't get to it, and we didn't get to a question. This will be available on our Bungalow Facebook page, and also through our website at chicagobungalow.org. Okay, any suggestions for getting a prairie feel in a small space, perhaps particular plant massings or visual tricks, or amendments that can create good soil for those plants?
Yeah, certainly. So I would say that's if you're going for a prairie feel, prairies tend to have kind of a little bit of randomness to them. In a small space, that could definitely tend to feel a little bit chaotic. So I would say, pick the varieties of the prairie plants that you like, but plant them in nice groups so that they read kind of almost like that container that we had one variety in one container and one variety in another container. Kind of pick your sample of plants and then plant them in groups so that way you can kind of read the things separately, but together they read like a prairie.
Makes sense.
What was the other part? Oh, amendments. Anytime you plant, you should amend. So new plants, coming from the nurseries, they've been babied in really wonderful, no clay in their soils, no nothing. So they're really used to really easy, fertile soils to kind of move their roots into. So whenever you plant something, say you have a 1 gallon plant, dig the hole twice as wide as the 1 gallon plant, add some compost in, and kind of like make a soup almost of your existing soil and the new soil, and then kind of reopen that space and then plant the 1 gallon plant in there. And that gives the new roots kind of some really soft ground to push themselves into.
Okay. Okay, I'm concerned about root systems on a tree in the backyard. What are some good examples of trees that won't affect house foundations and also or overtake your house or your neighbor's house?
I actually think the Chicago Bungalow Association has talked about this before. Typically, if a tree is going into your foundation, it's not the tree's fault. It's usually the foundation has some cracks, or there's something with the sewer line. But that's definitely kind of right plant, right place. You don't want to plant anything very large next to your space. So definitely, think about more ornamental scale trees near the house. So that would be something that's not going to get any larger than 10 foot tall, 10 foot wide, or in that range, maybe 15. If you bump it out a couple more feet. But if you've got existing large trees and shrubs, and they're causing issues to the foundation or to the sewer line, I would first and foremost get someone out to come, put a root down the sewer and see if there's a lot of tree roots into that. And then you might have to get an arborist out too. So that would be kind of two different ways to approach that.
Okay. And you had mentioned, and I couldn't remember it either, I would have answered it for you in this. There's a vertical tree that you mentioned, I think it was like in the first third of the presentation, where you're like, everybody should use these trees, they're the best trees ever. They're specially designed. What are those called?
That's called slender silhouette sweet gum. So it's a great tree. It's definitely a popular tree, meaning that nurseries have jacked up the prices. So that's something definitely to note. It's a popular tree because it's really good for small spaces, but yeah, 3.5 by like 20 foot tall eventually. But there are many just like it. There are upright beeches you could do too. There's a lot of upright columnar trees.
Okay. Okay. Is there a good lawn alternative that can handle foot traffic?
Yes. Well, it kind of depends on your exposure there, but in full sun, actually, I think without getting too far into this, I would look up steppables. Steppables it's a line of plants that have been kind of bred and selected because they're able to tolerate light foot traffic. You'll find in that steppable family that there aren't a lot of things that, well, I shouldn't say this. A lot of the times, a lot of those low growing things like thyme, for example, it's definitely foot traffic tolerant, but I wouldn't wear bare feet because the bees are going crazy on it. So that's definitely something to consider.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot. I mean, Carex, that ground cover that I showed in the beginning, that definitely tolerates foot traffic. Thyme tolerates foot traffic. Ajuga tolerates foot traffic. Vinca tolerates foot traffic. Pachysandra doesn't tolerate foot traffic. But yeah, there's a lot of things you could plant in there.
Okay. Speaking of, there's another, it's our backyard has been taken over by clover. We don't mind it, but it really attracts the bees. Would you recommend that as an alternative to grass? So what do you do in a situation?
I recommend micro clovers and clovers to incorporate into grass often, and just wear shoes. I think it's better to have bees.
Wear shoes. Yeah, that's a good one. Hi, Janet Pellegrini. I know Janet Pellegrini. She asked if the city of Chicago allows using ground cover in the parkway. Do you know?
The city of Chicago doesn't want you to plant anything in the parkway, but we should do it anyway.
I was waiting for that.
The only thing I would say is don't plant anything tall in the parkways. Think about, sight lines and being able to see when you're driving. You could certainly get away with planting stuff below 2 foot, and you could do a whole beautiful, and you could push that too. But if you stay below 2 foot, you won't have any. I mean, the city isn't going to come around and ticket you for that unless your parkway is like overgrown and weedy and creating a visual, barrier to traffic.
Okay. Okay, we have a lot of environmentally hazardous chemicals and dust in my area. Should I still try to plant?
You should. You should. I would say planting some deep-rooted natives like grasses and things that can really kind of get into the soil. Maybe they aren't like heavy flowering fragrant plants, but grasses would do really well in locations like that. Generally speaking, natives can tolerate some pretty harsh conditions. So depending on your exposure, I would look up, salt tolerant native plants for sun or whatever that would be. And I said salt because that's one that kind of is a very harsh plant that is across the board. People are concerned about kind of salt content. If you are either, not that we're near the ocean, but we all put salt on our sidewalks and that can certainly create very harsh soil conditions. So that's a good kind of place to start that can kind of kick you in that right direction.
Okay. And just to remind people, we're doing we're stopping at 7:15, but we should be able to get through a bunch, but a bunch keep coming in, so we just might not get to everybody. I apologize, but we should get through a bunch. Okay, our arbor vitae trees die in 2 spots in our yard. Other areas are fine. Any ideas?
That's a hard one. There might be some construction debris deep below the ground. A lot of times, well, arborvitaes are also, they tend to struggle over the winters. If we have a hard winter and they are, south or west facing and they get a ton of sun and then there's a ton of snow sitting on them and then we get a big windstorm or something, that can beat them up pretty badly. But there might be something with the soil underneath. So if you want to replace those, I would go pretty deep and add a lot of new soil, and that should help quite a bit.
Okay. And now I know how to say that properly, so thank you. How would you recommend removing the roots from a tree that are at soil level?
So that would be something you could, if you called an arborist, like Davy trees or Bartlett trees, they have big stump grinders. It's like crazy what they come out with, and they basically just they turn that entire stump into mulch. And it's something that is definitely left to the specialists. They've got the equipment to do it quickly. But then after they do that, then you can plant into that space again.
Okay. Could you go into some detail about why you shouldn't till?
Yeah, I think, well, if we think about kind of the way that we've already, our invention, John Deere, the tiller that like basically took all of our native prairie lands and kind of destroyed our soils basically. So if you have soil in your space, there's a few things you shouldn't do. You shouldn't really till because basically all of those years of decomposition and all of the compost that you've basically already created in your space, if you have kind of a garden or even sod, that's basically healthy soil there. So when you till it, you're basically taking the healthy soil that's underneath and bringing it to the top and like letting it bake in the sun. So you should keep that healthy soil low and then just add new nice healthy soil on top. And that way you kind of have this really nice kind of just lasagna of good soils rather than taking the good stuff and baking it. Other things that we shouldn't really be doing after we plant a garden, we should try to not walk on the soil. So I recommend, especially for big spaces, that you do put some stepping stones within that space so that you can go out and take care of plants and not step on the soil, because when we can step on the soil, then we're taking oxygen out of the soil and we're compacting it, which isn't allowing kind of as much water holding capacity.
Okay. Okay, some of these it looks like you've kind of already answered. Just really quick review. Someone's asking for recommendations for trees that are less than 15 feet tall. I know you named a couple, but would you mind just naming a couple again?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few different varieties of red buds that will stay pretty small, forest pansy. Basically, what you want to do is look at the dwarf trees. So pagoda dogwood stay pretty small. And then you really want to look at more, maybe even shrubs that are just big that feel like trees in your backyard. So that would be something like, smoke bush. Those can get big for a shrub, but they're like a perfect size for an ornamental tree. So those can get like 8 foot wide, 10, 12 foot tall. And smoke bush are great, really fast growing. Really interesting flower, really cool foliage. So that's a great plant. I love the smoke bush. And that's one that, like I said, bush acts like a tree, especially in a small space.
Cool. Okay. Somebody loves the creeping Jenny in her containers, and she wondered if she could use it as a ground cover as well.
You certainly could. I have creeping Jenny coming in from my neighbors, and I want to rip it all out because it won't go away. Creeping Jenny is definitely one that tends to create solid mats for your soil and bad for the other plants that are there. So I would definitely keep your creeping Jenny in containers because it's got beautiful chartreuse foliage. It's beautiful, but it's kind of invasive. So keep it to your containers.
Okay, good to know. Having grown up with a weeping willow tree, I'm skeptical about this one, but are weeping willows good for a front yard? And are they sold in Chicago?
Weeping willows are good for a front yard if you live in Mokina or if you live in one of the
they're huge.
We should not plant any weeping willows around us. Those weeping willows want to be near a stream bed, sucking in water. I mean, if you plant a weeping willow by your house, you will have issues with your foundation or your
seed. Yeah, we had like swings on. I mean, it was just like they're enormous. Let's see. Do you know if are fences enclosing the parkway on all four sides okay?
I think I just lost you there. I think I heard, are fences enclosing the parkway okay?
On all four sides okay.
That's another one where, okay, so basically anytime you plant something in the parkway or install something in the parkway, if the city has to come through and do anything to the sewer line, they can rip it up. So if you want to plant, or I keep saying plant, install a fence in the parkway, the first thing I recommend doing is knowing exactly when your sewer lines on the street were replaced last. And if it hasn't been done, then I would not invest in a fence. If it's been done in recent years, then yeah, why not? It's not going to happen again. But if the city has to come through and make any changes, then they'll rip that out with no remorse.
Yeah, no doubt. um, any advice on dealing with heavy clay soil? How best to amend it, or should it just be entirely replaced?
No, there are plants that can grow great in heavy clay soil. Basically, for every soil type, there is a plant that can live there. So ferns, I'm going to give two examples. They're the easy ones. Ferns are awesome for heavy soil. They're heavy feeders. They can tolerate sitting water. They're great for heavy soil. They'll perform wonders for you. On the opposite end, full sun, roses are actually really good heavy soil plants. Once again, heavy feeders, and roses can live in really, really poor soil conditions. Not so much sandy because that drains too quickly, but clay soils where it's holding water and it's super, super nutrient dense, roses and ferns. Oh, sorry.
I love this question. What is good and pokey to be put in the front and front windows to keep thieves away? Like, is there sort of like a plant you could weaponize?
Yeah, you could, oh gosh. Okay, well, junipers could be a good one. Junipers could certainly, I mean, if you did like tiny little dwarf junipers in the front window boxes, that could be a good option. Grasses, I guess. Good and pokey.
Yeah, I love that.
Sea holly. Sea holly is definitely pokey, but I wouldn't put that in a window box. Sea holly is like spiky and it hurts. I love it, but that one you could maybe put in the ground in front of the windows, but I wouldn't put that in a container. That's another great pollinator plant, sea holly.
Cool. It never really occurred to me to use plants that way, so I love that. This is a question that I often wrestle with myself. I have a bunch of containers with soil and dead herbs from last year. Can I reuse the soil, or should I empty the containers and plant my new herbs in new soil?
I think you can use a portion of the soil. I would say keep like 75-80% of that soil in there. Only because that top area, if you had any pests or bad fungus in your crops from last year, you don't want to put that back into your soil. So it might be. You weren't kidding.
I knew it was coming. Can't believe it took that long.
Yeah, if you had anything like that in your previous years, then you should scrap that soil. But just to be safe, if you don't think that you had that, just to be safe, I would recommend getting rid of kind of the top layer, dispersing it into the garden, and adding nice new vegetable or whatever it is, potting soil to the top of the planter.
Okay.
They'll almost kind of act like steroids too for the new plants, which is always good.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about burning bush? I'm not sure what that is. And are they poisonous to animals?
Burning bush are great. Burning bush are euonymus. They're very, very tough, very long lived. They also, I like them for about a week in the fall, and they're the most magnificent thing in the fall. I completely forget about their existence, and then like late October comes around, and burning bush are like the most stunning thing. So I would say if you've got a big space and you've got a corner near the back that you want just like a green blob all year, and then all of a sudden it turns vibrant red, then that's a great shrub for that. I wouldn't recommend it for foundation plantings or like if you're looking for a standalone thing, because like I said, it's pretty much just a green blob and then it shows off for like 1 or 2 weeks.
Okay. Could you, I think, two more. If I pull ivy off a tree, will the ivy above 10 feet that are still clinging on the tree stay alive? And I also wonder what that does for the tree's health. So
yeah, that's kind of a hard one. I don't know. I mean, I know they shouldn't stay alive. They certainly shouldn't stay alive. However, I think a lot of times what happens is people don't get rid of all of the ivy. So it does stay alive. Even one little sucker can grow really, really fast, and kind of cause the whole thing over again. So if you ever see people getting ivy off the side of their buildings, what they do is they basically come through and just like do a cut one year, and they let everything above just slowly die, and then they can kind of, 2 years later come back, or 1 year later come back and see what actually died, and then do it again. So it's something that you have to do over and over again to really make sure that you get all of the ivy.
Okay.
Definitely not good for the trees.
Okay. And this one, because I just know a lot of people are going to be dealing with this. Tips for keeping squirrels out of your gardens.
Ew.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's tough.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I know like alliums and daffodils and a lot of those, like there's a lot of like stinky plants. Alliums are in the onion family. Those definitely are like deterrents. But yeah, squirrels are gonna do what they want to do. So
Yeah.
maybe don't feed them. Don't leave stuff out there that they want to eat. Sunflowers even. I mean,
Yeah, it's hard. I am surrounded by squirrels. So, all right. Well, we, most of the questions that are remaining, or at least partially answered, I think already, and we're just a minute over now. So, again, all of this has been recorded. You guys can watch it on our Facebook page and also through the chicagobungalow.org website. Bridget, thank you so much. This was fabulous. Learned a ton tonight, and hopefully we'll do more of this again.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks all for attending, and yeah, this is fun. Have a good year. Have a good growing season.
I know, very exciting. Oh, actually, really quick, are there any sales or anything coming up with City Grange?
Yeah, so actually what we're doing is we're doing some, well, we've got a lot going on. We've got a lot of our cool crops are coming in within the next week or two. We've got some now, but we're going to be doing some pre-designed garden kits online where you basically get a whole tray of native plants, and then they're kind of curated to shade, part sun, rain garden, full shade, and then you get a little plan with it too. We don't have those posted yet. We probably won't for a few weeks, but that's definitely something to keep an eye out for.
And are you guys doing the herbs like that again this year as well?
Yeah, we're going to do little 6-packs of herbs. I think those are actually, they might be posted now. Okay. But yeah, we're going to do 6-packs of herbs. Basically, we'll have a lot of stuff online that's all going to be kind of like pre-curated. So Jonah's working on curated annual kits where you can either get the whole container just dropped right to your door, pre-designed, pre-planted, all that. Or if you're more a DIY hands-on person, but you don't want to pick the plants, we're going to do like kits where you get all the material and then you plant it in your container. Yeah, so there'll be a lot of fun stuff coming up.
Cool. And the website again?
citygrange.com.
All right, great. All right, Bridget, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for taking some time out tonight and hanging out with us. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks.